Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amir, and coming up in today's newscast. Heavy clashes in Jenin throughout today, seeing massive fire exchange between IDF forces and armed gunmen. Meantime, tensions rising as cabinet advances thousands of new housing units in Judean Samaria. And later, from tragedy to triumph, fallen brothers' gift of sight, inspiring hope and renewed lives. Three Palestinians were killed as heavy clashes broke out between terrorist gunmen and Israeli troops in the city of Jenin this morning. About 30 Palestinians were reportedly wounded, as were 7 soldiers hit by a road-rise blast. And ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
An Israeli Apache helicopter gunship carried out rare strikes in Jenin, the first in Judea and Samaria in some 2 decades, in order to evacuate wounded soldiers from the battle zone after a vehicle was hit by a large roadside explosive device. In a brief joint statement, the IDF and Border Police said forces entered Jenin to detain 2 wanted terrorists. During the activity, a massive exchange of fire took place between the forces and armed terrorists in the area. Large numbers of explosive devices were hurled at the forces. 5 army vehicles were damaged. The forces responded with live fire, the statement said, adding that several suspects were hit. Palestinian sources said that 3 people were killed and at least 30 wounded amid clashes with Israeli troops in the city. The IDF said that as the security forces were exiting the city, a military vehicle was hit by an explosive device, injuring 2 soldiers and 5 border police. An IDF Apache helicopter was then deployed and fired missiles at the area where gunmen were identified. This, said the army, in order to allow the wounded troops to be evacuated from the area to hospitals in Israel. All are reported with light to moderate injuries from the blast. The army also fired flares over the city, apparently over fears that Palestinians in Jenin could have shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. In the early 2000s, during the Second Intifada, the IDF used attack helicopters in Judea and Samaria, but only on rare occasions.
And joining me now is CEO and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, Brigadier General Reserves Amir Avivi. Amir, how unusual is it for the IDF to use Apache helicopters during an operation in Judea and Samaria?
Well, it's pretty unusual, but it's due to the circumstances. We have IDF and Border Patrol force that went to apprehend terrorists inside Jenin. There were improvised explosive devices that were triggered on the force. We have several soldiers hurt, and in order to protect them, in order to secure the area, they are using this means that are pretty unusual to the region.
I understand that in this case, the helicopters were used to help evacuate the wounded soldiers. Flares were fired against possible weapons that could be fired at the Apaches. A real battle in nearby Samaria, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. And I think it shows that the operation the IDF and Shin Bet have been doing for more than a year now to try to deal with the burst of terror in Judea and Samaria is not bringing the desired results. Terror is not going down. The terror infrastructure is continuing to be built inside the cities. We know that the Palestinian Authority is not functional. It's not controlling the northern area of Samaria, in the area of Jenin. And just going in and out to apprehend specific soldiers, it's not enough. They are building the force. There is more and more weapons. We see more and more improvised explosive devices. It's risking our soldiers. It's also risking civilians who live in the area. And this requires the IDF to rethink the way they're operating and maybe enlarge the operation dramatically in the northern part of the Samaria region.
But Amir, there have been relatively few terror attacks reported in recent weeks. Luckily, is that because of the terror cells have been severely damaged and constant pressure from the IDF, or is it something else maybe?
Well, actually, I don't see a decline in the level of terror attacks. We have seen devastating attacks in the Jordan Valley with the D family. We've seen just this last week 3 soldiers that were hurt in the northern part of Samaria. It's ongoing. There is all the time action. It's true that most of the terror attacks are inside the region of Judea and Samaria and not in Tel Aviv or places like that, but still there is a lot of terror going on.
You're saying that not enough is being done. What has to be done, in your opinion? What's the solution?
Well, we need an ongoing large operation to really destroy the infrastructure that is being built inside these cities. I think it's an interest from a security point of view, but even looking at the possibility of a functional Palestinian authority, the buildup of force that we are seeing is mainly Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It's challenging the Palestinian Authority. It might overthrow them the day after Abu Mazen. Therefore, in order to secure Israel, secure the region, and stabilize it, we need a large-scale operation and an ongoing one. This is not about just going in and out and apprehending a specific soldier. We need to really deal with the buildup of infrastructure, of terror infrastructure that we are seeing inside Jenin and the towns surrounding Jenin.
Amir, to go more in depth, much of the security problem has centered in northern Samaria, Nablus, and Jenin. Does the IDF need to carry out more raids as part of the solution and more roadblocks?
So I'm saying this is not about raids. Raids are not solving the issue. A raid means you have a very specific terrorist to apprehend. You just go in and out to apprehend a specific terrorist, and you don't deal with the overall infrastructure. We don't need raids. We need an attack, an ongoing operation. This is a much bigger issue than just a pinpoint operation with a special unit and precise intelligence. This needs to really bring like brigades and go in and conquer parts of this area and really go house to house and deal with the infrastructure that is being built inside these cities.
Praying for a quiet here. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amir.
Thank you very much.
So we know the news is fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our new app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. Over sharp U.S. opposition, the Israeli cabinet advances plans to approve thousands of new housing units in Judea and Samaria. The plans call for over 4,500 housing units in various Jewish communities, and the announcement prompted a sharp rebuke from Washington. ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
In response to Sunday's Israeli cabinet decision to advance over 4,500 new housing units in Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian Authority, which exercises limited self-rule in parts of the territories, said it would boycott a meeting of the Joint Economic Committee with Israel scheduled for today. In Washington, the State Department said it was deeply troubled by the Israeli move, which it branded as an obstacle to peace. Washington has been pressuring Jerusalem to avoid what it calls unilateral steps that could incite further tensions. Washington also criticized an Israeli decision to fast-track the approval process for homes in Judea and Samaria, removing diplomatic safeguards that have been in place for almost 3 decades. The process will now be streamlined to only require the approval of Finance Minister Smotrich. The new housing units for settlements are on the agenda at next week's Planning Council meeting, although only about 1,300 are up for final approval, with the remainder still going through the clearing process. Since entering office in January, Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition has approved the construction of more than 7,000 new housing units. It also amended a law to clear the way for settlers to return to 4 settlements that had previously been evacuated in northern Samaria. The Israeli announcements come as U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Middle East Affairs Barbara Leaf is visiting Israel and the Palestinians.